All right, everybody, it's a WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. The return of the Ombudsman. How's it going, Joe Lull?
Doing great, Craig. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Are you still enjoying retirement? I'll just call it retirement.
It has been outstanding. It has been everything I thought it would be plus some.
Well, I got to tell you, and this is not speaking to the people who are now on the weekends, but I miss the Ombudsman. I miss your angle on stories. It's sports radio, so there's only so much difference you can provide. But your show was a different flavor.
Well, I appreciate that, Craig, and you're certainly not the first person who has, said something of that sort. So it's good, it's good to know, and it's good for the ego certainly to feel like you're missed by a few folk. So that certainly is music to my ears. But at the same time, I got to tell folks, while I enjoyed every minute of the years that I spent doing sports reporting and sports talk radio and my time at the Fan. Still to this day, we're looking back, it was beginning of February that I departed the Fan. I still don't miss it. I'm enjoying life without it, and it's good to be missed by people, but I certainly don't miss it, and I've moved on with my life, and I'm quite content where I'm at.
It's funny. It's like when my first son was born. It was kind of like the last gasp of golf in my life, and so I just kind of stopped playing. And then after 2 seasons off from playing golf, I was like, I could start playing again. And then I realized, oh yeah, no, I don't miss it. And I haven't taken it back up.
It's ironic you bring up golf, because that's one of the things that has really filled the void that sports radio had filled in my life. Is I've noticed that in recent months, I've had a lot more time to play golf and work on my horrid game, and I've enjoyed that immensely. So that's been one of the blessings of getting out of the business, is I actually have some time now. I don't have to be completely immersed in the sports scene every second of every day, trying to keep up. I was just talking to one of my best friends today about free agency, and he's trying to break down the cap with me and everything. I said, it's nice for me for the first time in about a decade to not be twisting myself up into pretzels mentally at this time of year with free agency and the Cavs trying to figure out the cap. I'm just watching from afar, and, I might go hit the driving range later or play 9. And, it's nice to be able to take a step back and do things like spend more time on the golf course as opposed to, hovering over hoopsites.com's salary calculator every waking second of every day.
Well, and we'll certainly get to some of those things, because I do want your take on some of that stuff. But before we leave the Fan, I mean, obviously, the last time we talked about how strange and how different the landscape was appearing in sports talk radio. And since we last talked, they shook up the morning show, and everything seems to be in transition. There's no stability compared to what we were used to for 3+ years.
It's so ironic, Craig, because when you and I last talked, I shared with you and the listeners of your podcast the conversation that I had, the last conversation I had with my former boss, Andy Ross, at the Fan, and his exact words that were kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me were that if he had his way, there wouldn't be any changes anytime soon to the lineup at the Fan. And that kind of effectively killed my hope of getting a full-time job in the business. And here it was, a couple months later that word comes down, Chuck Booms is let go by the Fan, and now there's, turmoil with the morning show, and obviously rumors that Kevin Kiley won't be here for much longer. And I've had many people come up to me and say, boy, don't you wish you would have been able to hold out a few more months? And to that, I won't make this about me. To that, my answer is no. I'm thankful that I got out when I did, because I'm sure this upheaval at the station would have caused, it certainly would have made my life very difficult in recent months if I was still there. But beyond that, it does seem like there's a lot of, I guess upheaval is the word, and certainly the morning show and what they're doing with that. I got to be honest, I don't listen to the station very often. I'd say probably less than 24 times in the last 5-6 months I've actually tuned into sports talk radio, but I have listened a few times in recent weeks, just out of curiosity to hear what they're doing with that morning show. And, for whatever it's worth, but, my measly opinion, I think the answer is right there for them. And I didn't think just knowing these two individuals, I never really thought they would make a dynamic duo or a great tandem, but I heard a little bit of Ken Carman and Anthony Lima together last week, and if management at that radio station doesn't plug those two guys together in the morning and say good riddance to Kevin Kiley when his contract is up, well, then that just confirms to me that there's a massive amount of ineptitude over there, because that answer is right in front of their faces. Ken and Anthony were outstanding together. I think they put on one of the best radio shows in the city, and probably one of the better sports shows in the country if given a chance and given the resources. Those guys were just outstanding, and I'm certainly rooting for both of them.
You know, I enjoyed the week of Lima and Carmen, or Karma and Lima, however you want to put it. But the last time that you and I talked, we talked so glowingly about Anthony Lima. Apparently, it was embarrassing. So I'm gonna say, you know, he's okay. He's okay. That Anthony Lima.
Well, yeah, he's all right. The funny thing is, Lima and I have been friends for over a decade now. We don't talk very often, maybe once a month or so.
We were frenemies. He used to troll Waiting for Next Year.
Oh, I know. He would come after you guys hard back in the cursed Cleveland days.
Look who's sold out now, Anthony. Look who's sold out now.
Exactly. Now he's friends with everybody. It's anything to persevere, right, Craig? But no, I mean, I consider Anthony a friend. I consider Ken Carman a friend, but it's not about that. I mean, JT Schooner's a friend. I worked with him. I consider a lot of people who were over there friends. And I have no grudges against anyone personally. As a matter of fact, when Chuck Booms was let go, you know, I talked to him within, I'd say less than an hour of his dismissal. I was on the phone with Chuck. You know, he and I have always had an interesting relationship, but I've always considered Chuck a friend, and I hated to see what happened to him.
You guys disagreed a lot, but it was always mutually respectful.
Exactly, and I think that's, you know, there's just such an ego-driven business that sometimes people allow their egos to overinflate and cause them to do things that they probably shouldn't do, and we allow our opinions or our stances on issues and disagreements with others to really go too far. And yeah, Chuck and I disagreed on a number of things over a long period of time. I mean, we worked together back in 2010 at Digital Sports Network, Cleveland.com, and you know, we certainly didn't see eye to eye and everything back then. But when I replaced him on DSN, remember him telling me that, you know, you don't want to be the guy to replace Chuck Booms, and I guess he was right, because that place went belly up about 2 months after they let me replace Chuck Booms. But you know, I hated to see what happened to Chuck. But all that being said, you know, just for the people of Cleveland that enjoy sports talk radio, and me being an outsider now, being out of the business and someone who had been in the business for a while, you know, I simply want the best product out there for people to listen to, and a product that I may from time to time be interested in listening to, because again, I don't listen very often now. But Anthony and Ken, I think, put on an outstanding show. They're both very intelligent people, talented broadcasters, and like I said, you know, I'm rooting for the two of them to end up with that morning show. Nothing against Kevin Kiley. You know, I've spoken with the man 2 or 3 times. He probably couldn't pick me out of a lineup if he was offered $10,000 to do so. And he's certainly a very talented professional broadcaster in his own right. He's been around a very long time and done great things. But I think Kiley's seen his day in Cleveland, and I think it would be great for the city, great for sports talk, great for radio, great for the fans. If Anthony and Ken got a shot to do that morning show, it would be great radio.
Well, I certainly think it'd be fun too. Let's talk about some of the actual sports, and even, you know, from your kind of arm's length perspective, because I've been kind of embracing an arm's length perspective as well, even as somebody who has not stepped away kind of from Waiting for Next Year. But I've been very vocal about the fact that I am not getting caught up in micro-analyzing OTAs and things like that this year, because I've done it in the past and I've tried to pick out players, and what I came to realize is just because I want to overanalyze something doesn't mean that there's something meaningful there to pull out. And I think I fell into that trap in prior years, and I don't want to do it again.
That's a great point, Craig, and you could really apply that across the board to sports in general. I mean, wasn't there a picture that came out late yesterday of Kevin Love and LeBron James apparently poolside in Los Angeles? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, well, we could spend an entire day on sports talk radio trying to break down or writing columns and doing, commenting back and forth on a blog about, why they were meeting and what it means and what they might be doing. And is LeBron having a secret free agent summit? Are there other guys whether it's OTAs or something like this meeting, or even going back to last year, certainly last year, and my tweet about Dan Gilbert's plane and the mayhem that ensued after that. It's fun to an extent.
Man, you were a clown for 2 months in some people's eyes.
Yeah, I guess so, but it's fun to play those games to an extent, but then it gets to the point where you're like, this is lunacy. What are we spending our time doing? The OTAs are a great example. We're going to break down what does the OTA even stand for? The
organized team activities.
Organized team activities, and they're optional as well, unless you play for Bill Belichick, I guess. Yeah, I mean, we're going to break this stuff down. I read some stuff on the Browns and how, the linebacker, Solomon, came around late in the year, Scott Solomon, how he's come on strong, but Mingo looks, you read this stuff, it's like, boy, everybody looks great. And the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl when you read this stuff, except for maybe quarterback, where we still got a little concern because Manziel hasn't completely caught on, and Josh McCown is Josh McCown. But you ask yourself, what am I spending my time doing? What are we even analyzing here? And I guess as someone who was one of the people doing that for over a decade, maybe I shouldn't even be talking on the subject. But I'm with you. You kind of go with, what are we doing here? There's other things I could be doing with my time than breaking down OTAs trying to derive meaning where there really is no meaning whatsoever.
So at this point, I've reduced it to its attendance, who showed up, whose deal got signed, and who didn't get hurt. But that and are the Browns doing something stupid with anything in the depth chart? And for all those questions, there are no bad answers right now. The Browns are staying in their lane with Josh McCown and Johnny Manziel. Nobody significantly, knock on wood, has gotten hurt yet. Most everybody showed up, including Tayshaun Gibson, who signed his tender. Okay, there's the rest of the news. That's it. Trying to hyperanalyze who's going to win the pass rushing jobs and get the most. I mean, even preseason.
Here's the other funny thing, Craig. Here's the other funny thing about it in regards to the Browns. I think, and if you look at this past offseason, most people, I think, were pleased with the draft. They built up the lines and trying to build the team inside out, all that. But if you were to take a survey of Browns fans right now and say, what do you expect out of this team in 2015 wins-wise, I think the average would come out around, 6 wins probably?
Probably.
They got a difficult schedule. We know we're going into the season with Josh McCown, who's a journeyman, veteran backup quarterback who was horrid in Tampa last year. We got Manziel, who, let's hope he's over whatever issues he had, but he certainly hasn't shown much in very minimal time on the field yet. So if you kind of survey the fans, I think the average fan would say, the Browns are the Browns, so they're going to go 6-10 again, and we'll probably end up firing the coach. And I've always found it funny that is the majority mindset of fans. And yet at the same time, we're going to sit here and microanalyze every little aspect of OTAs and it's like, if you really think this team is going to suck so bad that they're going to lose 10 games again and actually take a step back from a year ago, then why are you wasting your time microanalyzing, who the backup strong side linebacker should be and what the 6th round draft pick did during the OTAs and what Tayshaun Gibson's contract did. If you think the team's going to be 6-10, why the hell are you wasting your time? It's just like fans are almost talking out of both sides of their mouth. If you think things are going to be so terrible and it's such a doomsday scenario, yet you're so invested in it. I've just always found that kind of funny. Like, maybe it's a defense mechanism that we expect them to be bad, or we proclaim that we expect them to be bad, so that we can kind of guard ourselves against the disappointment if and when they are bad. But at the same time, we're going to dive neck deep into everything when it comes to, the backup linebacker and should Connor Shaw be seeing more snaps and all these little minute details of the football team when we're saying publicly that we expect the football team to be terrible. I just always found that to be a little bit ironic.
Well, and I do think it's a defense mechanism. I don't think any Browns fans really in their heart want to believe the team's that bad. And I think of all the years, yes, the Browns have a difficult schedule this year, but that schedule metric doesn't even mean anything after the first couple weeks, depending on injuries. And the NFL is such an impossible thing to predict. All you can ever do is look at the totality of what a team does and try and decide whether it made them better or worse. And it's very hard to look at what the Browns did this offseason from the draft and free agency all across the board and not think that they're somehow better. The problem is that better is a relative term compared to the divisional opponents, compared to the schedule, this is what parity is made of. It's impossible to predict.
Right. And if you look back at last year, I tend to agree with you. I think the Browns are better, and maybe not in a sexy, flashy way because, the quarterback is what it is, and it's not like they went out and added big-time playmaking talents, but they did beef up the lines and I think improved the defense further, and we could go through it. But you look at it last year, Craig, how many games was this team in right to the end? And they ended up losing 9 of 16. But this team, with all of their flaws a year ago, was not that far away. That's the funny thing is we look at it now and say, okay, if they're better than they were last year, then they were a 7-9 football team last year, and that 7-9 football team was this close to maybe going 10-6 instead of 7-9, then maybe we're not as far away as people think. That's why they play the games, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're not, with statements like that, you're just not falling into the defense mechanism that we need as Browns fans, I guess.
Right.
All right. Last but not least, another team where I think you can justify their process, their offseason process. The Cleveland Indians, they go out, they get Brandon Moss, they do a lot of the right things, and it just hasn't translated. At some point, it's very hard because I think that a lot of us, and I can't speak for you, but I think a lot of us co-signed for what the Indians did this offseason and just being patient with guys to come back healthy and do whatever. It's not working. And so now the age-old Cleveland Indians complaint about should there be accountability? If so, where? And will we ever get it?
That's such a difficult question. And I am not a big Twitter guy as much as I used to be these days, but I opened up Twitter yesterday, specifically last night, and I saw the vitriol being directed toward the Indians, as I expected. And it goes right back to the same tune of, the Dolans won't spend the money, and Shapiro and Antonetti are the common denominator with all these teams that have, underachieved. And since 2001, the Indians have only made the playoffs a couple times, and once it was a one-game wild card loss. And it's the same old complaints, and I get that. And when you talk accountability, there comes a point where you just have to step back and say, you're the guy in charge. What you've done has not worked. Time to try something new. I get that. At the same time, like you just said, you co-signed. I know I co-signed. I think a lot of fans co-signed on what the Indians did this past off season. We were all on board with the plan, and that's where I know I'm in the minority on this. And people would say, I know Scott Rapp has always said, he's not a general manager. It's not up to him to decide what to do or what not to do. But I've always felt that as a fan or as a member of the media, if you're going to critique, if you're going to criticize what a GM, what a manager, what a coach does, if you're going to, go after their job performance, and certainly that's what people are doing with the Indians right now, then you sure as all better have had a better plan in the first place or disagreed with the course of action from the get-go. I don't think it's fair, and I know the world's not fair, but I don't think it's fair for us to say, boy, yeah, the Indians did a nice job this offseason. You had Brandon Moss. They go out and get Gavin Floyd, which adds depth to the rotation, and I know that blew up in their face. But, nice offseason tribe. Sports Illustrated picks in the world to win the World Series. We're all on board. And then here we are, end of June, and we're all going to go, what were they thinking? They have no idea what they're doing over at the corner of Carnegie and Ontario. They should all be fired. We're the same people that said, good job, thumbs up, like what you're doing. So if none of us had a better course of action, if none of us had a better plan or a better idea of how to approach this, then how can we sit back and say, oh, they've done a terrible job, fire them all? I know you and I, Craig, don't get paid to be the general manager of the Cleveland Indians. But if we're going to have opinions, then we should be held accountable for our opinion. And if our opinions were the Indians are doing the right thing, and it turns out that what they did doesn't pan out, and they end up in the last place in the American League Central, then you and I should be held accountable for our opinions every bit as much as that GM and that assistant GM and president and manager should be held accountable for the actions that we all approved of.
Well, and this is why I loved your show on the radio, because that was really, really well put. And I kind of think I disagree with most of it, but it was still really well put. No, this idea that I co-signed on it, but I'm not an expert. And I do think that over the course of time, and certainly Antonetti, Shapiro have gotten tons and tons and tons of time. This is not the knee-jerk Browns or Dan Gilbert buying the team and firing a coach in the first 6 months or whatever. There's some balance to be had between, thinking that you can co-sign on their process and still at the end of the day looking at the results and just deciding that they're not good enough and thinking that a change needs to be made.
Well, and I get that too. Okay, I do. But if we look at it, this is a team that made the playoffs 2 years ago, albeit It was a one-game wild card and they got bounced in that one game. How many games out were they last year? They won, 87 a year ago, I believe?
Something like that. Yeah, it was not a bad showing, and if they improve on 10 or 12 of those games, it's that they weren't that far.
Right. I mean, they were right there. I think they ended up, a couple games out of the playoffs, if that. This year's been terrible. It's been, a massive disappointment to this point. And what I think makes it even more difficult is it's not like there's one area where you can point your finger and say, boy, they knew they needed to fix X and they didn't. I mean, really, what moves were there or are there for the Indians to make that they haven't made? I mean, you say, okay, our catcher is Yan Gomes. He had an all-star type season last year. Now he's been very disappointing this year between the injury and his performance. Yan Gomes has been a big disappointment this year. Carlos Santana thought to be one of the cornerstones of the team. Well, how has he done at first base? Defensively, he's been average at best, and he continues to hit, 218 with less power than we anticipated. The guy walks a lot, and that's about it. Jason Kipnis has been outstanding. Right? The left side of the infield was a disaster all year.
They've already shipped it out.
Exactly. They shipped it out. They brought up the two top prospects, Urshela, who's a decent prospect, and Lindor, who we've been hearing about for years. So they've addressed that issue by bringing up two prospects that we expect to play well. The outfield, you got Michael Brantley, Moss, who strikes out a lot, but he's been your best power source. Murphy and Rayburn have actually done a pretty nice job in a platoon situation. If you combine the two of them, they're hitting over 300 with 8 home runs. I mean, the two of them have done a nice job platooning. And then you have Michael Bourne, who you're going to have to give some time because you gave him that contract a couple of years ago. So outside of Michael Bourne, who could maybe make the argument, just cut your losses, release the guy, pay him his money, and put someone in who can actually hit and actually steal a base, where is there a spot in this lineup that you say, okay, that's a glaring weakness that they failed to address? I mean, it's just a matter of, what are you going to dump Yan Gomes? You're going to dump Carlos Santana?
Well, and it's hard to blame them for breaking camp with Chisenhall.
Exactly. And look, Chisenhall didn't cut it. Jose Ramirez didn't cut it. They gave each guy, 40-plus games, and then they cut bait and they went to the youngsters. So, pitching-wise, with the rotation, I mean, the fifth spot in the rotation has been a mess, but hopefully Cody Anderson can fix that. But the rest of the guys...
I don't think anybody's complaining about the pitching staff at all, so you're right there.
So that's my point, Craig. As a whole, they're the worst team in the American League Central right now. But if we're going to, as fans, try to fix it, how do we fix it? I mean, I don't know how Shapiro and Antonetti are supposed to fix it when you have guys that you consider to be core players that either have not ramped up to the level of production you expect from them when you're talking about Urshela and Lindor, or guys like Carlos Santana, Yan Gomes, who are simply playing below the level of expectation that every reasonable fan and media member and scout had for them. And then you just have a flat-out bust in Michael Bourne, and I'm not even counting Swisher right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're to do. That's the tough thing here is if there were moves that I saw, boy, they should have done X, Y, and Z, and they failed to do it, get rid of them. okay, that's one thing. But
I think I got it. I want Chris Antonetti to walk into that clubhouse the next time they come home. I want him to walk into that clubhouse after a loss, pick out the biggest guy he can find, and just fight him. Just fight him. No, I don't know. You're right. I'm just making.
Well, what if Antonetti's like a black belt and we don't realize it, and he ends up, seriously injuring Brandon Moss, who is our only power threat right now? Is that really what you're advocating?
I think I might feel better. We'd be on the cover of Deadspin for a minute, and people would be like, "Oh, redefining the term dumpster fire."
Exactly. You know what? I know this is cliche, and we are we're halfway through the season at this point, I believe. But there's still a lot of baseball left. So do I expect them to make the playoffs, win the division? No, not at this point. Not the way they've played. But stranger things have happened. And maybe they can still make this interesting. I think reasonable minds, people that follow baseball, would say they certainly have not played to the level that is fair to expect them to play at so far this year. So, water tends to find its level. Maybe that'll sort itself out in the second half. And maybe they'll at least give us something to be interested in and follow along with and be vested in, through mid to late September.
Well, let's hope so. Thank you so much for coming back on, Joe Lull. We've missed your voice on the local airwaves, so hopefully appearances on podcasts like this or on this podcast will give people at least a little taste of what they're missing.
Well, the half dozen that are certainly looking for that little taste of what Joe Lull has to say, I'm glad I'm able to give it to them via your podcast, Craig, and I'd be glad to come back anytime, my friend.
Awesome stuff, and thanks for listening, everybody. Tell a friend. Let everybody know we're out here. We're trying to provide a little bit different voice than everything else you're hearing on the radio, and so I hope you're enjoying it. And until next time, everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.
Waiting for next year.